is made possible by our partners, Solar Dynamics, the most efficient energy systems.
Hello and a pleasant good night to you. Welcome to another edition of the People's Business. I'm your host, Shane Seeley, and tonight we get into the role of mental health specialists in navigating difficult times. And I think tonight we've covered the bases as far as getting those specialists here on the program to discuss these issues. So with me tonight is Dr. June Price-Humphrey. She's a consultant psychiatrist and member of the Barbados Association of Psychiatrists. Mrs. Sharon-Rose Gittens is the president of the Association of Professional Social Workers. Ms. Christa Soleyn is a clinical psychologist, and Mr. Lorin Brathwaite is an occupational therapist. Thank you all for joining me on the program. Stick around. We have a lot to talk about as we get into the role of these mental health specialists during what have been some difficult times of recent. We'll take a break and be right back with more on the People's Business. Thanks for sticking around with us on the People's Business as we discuss something that I think that many people can relate to. Some difficult times that we've all been managing during the last 2 years of COVID-19. Some people have sought help. There are some people, though, suffering in silence. So we are trying to reach all of those who would have been affected over the last 2 years. And I mean, difficult times don't only relate to COVID-19, but that has been the predominant thing affecting us here in Barbados and those people right across the world. So welcome back, Dr. Price-Humphrey, Mrs. Sharon-Rose Gittens, Christa Soleyn, and Lorin Brathwaite to talk about some of these issues which they have been dealing with in their individual practices. Let's start with you, Dr. Price-Humphrey. You're a consultant psychiatrist. You're also a member of the Barbados Association of Psychiatrists. What have you been seeing in recent time, and I say recent, last 2 years? COVID-19 has really taken a toll on so many, and I'm thinking that many people would have come knocking on your doors seeking your assistance.
Well, thank you for having us. Yes, these last 2 years have been extremely challenging, and I hope that we get into a fruitful discussion as to why that is. Let's start, if you permit me, to talk about good mental health, because then we can compare that with poor mental health and even mental illness. So someone
Indeed.
who's in good mental health, they have a sense of feeling well and cheerful. They can achieve their potential. So they have goals that they want to achieve, and they feel like they're moving along and achieving those goals. They're making a contribution to their home, their family, their work, society. And they can cope with the normal day-to-day stressors. And the reason COVID has been so challenging is that this is an extraordinary stressor. It's not one in which we could have been easily prepared, and it didn't just affect your health. It can sometimes trigger a sense of despair, uncertainty, not just regarding the disease itself, but job security, financial security. Persons who would usually use social activities as their stress management tool were unable to do so. Persons who may would like to travel, whether it's around Barbados, the Caribbean, or the world, are unable to do so. And attending your religious and faith-based organizations, going out to karaoke, all the things that we would usually do to maintain good mental health, adversely affected in these last 2 years. And so we have persons presenting who may have thought to themselves, well, each of these individual things are fine, but all together, I'm not coping. I may feel sad or tired or lethargic, or I'm just not thinking straight. I'm always worried. I'm always anxious. Uh, but then on the other hand, there are persons where they were, you'd almost say, a sense of denial. They just kept doing things as they were doing because they just couldn't absorb how
That was their
important
coping
this time
mechanism.
was. Yeah, they just decided that this wasn't going to affect them. They were going to do everything they usually do because it's just too much to handle. And so, in terms of where I see persons in the public system, and I see them in the polyclinic system, we had persons presenting who would otherwise felt that they could cope with the normal stresses of life, but the normal, regular things are now too much for them. And those were the persons I see. And then I also saw persons who had diagnosable mental illnesses now, who were already struggling. They were holding on before and holding strain, but decompensated during this time. So those were the two groups of persons I and my colleagues were seeing in our practices.
And quickly, before we go on to some of our other guests, did you definitely see an uptick in the number of people seeking help in that regard? Was it
I
a
would say we
noticeable
saw
uptick?
I can't give numbers, but I would say that we definitely saw a shift in the type of presentations. And remember, mental illness and the polyclinic system was only one of several areas where persons can seek help. And I do think overall, when you may combine what I was seeing and our colleagues tonight have seen, I think persons were seeking help because they realized it wasn't something they could brush under the carpet anymore, right? It's something that now is affecting everyone. But for my one, yes, I did see increased numbers, but of different demographic persons who may not have otherwise thought to seek help, but now they realize, look, I really do need it, even if it's quote unquote somebody to talk to.
I want to stick a pin there because we want to talk about those demographics as well, get into who are these people who are now seeking assistance that would not normally have come through your doors. I want to go to Christa now. Talk about your role as a clinical psychologist in all of this, and has that changed over the span of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Sorry, Shane. I think I disconnected a little bit. Something happened there, but I did hear
It
the beginning.
happens. Another
Yes,
effect of COVID-19 with the virtual realm that we're in.
I
We
know.
have these issues from time to time. But are
I
you
know.
seeing your role in the same vein as you saw it before the pandemic? Do you operate differently now to suit your clients during this time, during these difficult times?
Yes, I definitely do. So I actually turned my practice primarily to e-therapy. I do face-to-face. I work with NGOs, so I do have to do face-to-face for vulnerable groups. But I did see an increase in people asking for e-therapy. And so as a psychologist, I'm a clinical psychologist, which is a professional specialty in psychology. So it's more about talk therapy or behavioral modification plans and things like that. So Dr. Price-Humphrey and I may see the same type of clients. But of course, I don't prescribe medication. So a lot of what I've had to do is talk therapy and really talk with people who now realize, listen, I thought I was coping, but I really can't right now. And I did see an increase in people reaching out. And the thing about it, everybody here kind of works in the same field. And so we've done referrals to each other, or we try to work together in order to help the clients that reach out. Of course, I'm in private practice. I'm not in a polyclinic or anything like that, but I have seen definitely an increase. And I know my colleagues in the Barbados Society of Psychology, we have a body of psychologists. I know they've expressed as well, seeing lots of people coming for help.
Wow. Occupational therapy is also in the mix when you're trying to help people cope during difficult times. Lorin, what's your take on the situation? How have you been coping in dealing with what seems to be an increased demand for your services across the board?
Well, just let me say, just so that we get a clear idea of where I fall in the care pathway, right? Usually people are referred to me after they've seen maybe somebody like Christa or Dr. Price-Humphrey, and they're having difficulty with doing their activities, because occupational therapy is about what we're doing and being able to do things despite having an illness or coping with a difficulty, right? So for me, technically, I can't say that I've seen an uptick, because like my practice started in the pandemic, essentially, because I returned to Barbados to start probably like at the end of 2019 and just before then. So I started in the pandemic, but I can say that colleagues who are working in the public sector, they have said that they noticed an increase, definitely. Now, for me, the people that I was seeing, how I had to adjust my way of approaching them was looking at the context, because just as Dr. Price-Humphrey mentioned about the restrictions, you can't go out, you can't socialize, and all those are things that people use to cope. Sometimes they do it unconsciously, but they use it to cope, and that takes off a lot of the pressure. So teaching them skills, different ways to cope, helping them to find more individual coping skills is what I have had to be working on with my clients.
And I think it would be pretty difficult for you too, Sharon-Rose Gittens. You being a social worker, you can't get out to those who you normally go to help them. How have you been handling that situation? How have you been managing your clients?
I would like to say that, like the other persons on the team, we have had an increased number of clients, but within the field of social work, the other concern was the social workers themselves being on the front line. Mm-hmm. And in some cases, with the increased numbers, with the increased shift of approach, because social work is one in which we have face-to-face interviews, we engage in that interaction and interpreting verbal communications as well. We do home visits depending on the type or where the social worker is, as the association is really made up of a diverse group of social workers. So we have both those in general practice, those medical social workers, those persons who are in organizations that are not only private but also public. So in that diversity, I think where we struggle quite a bit and where it felt really heavy was not only the numbers and the increased numbers of persons seeking help, but also the social worker recognizing our vulnerability as a parent who also had to deal with the online school and the blended learning, also as a caretaker within a home of an elderly person, an elderly parent. Then you found social workers themselves may have had some significant challenges. And then you also had social workers who, as I think our listeners will remember, where the social work agencies would have been closed because of COVID. Yeah. So COVID-19 came totally unexpected and impacted on all of us in our society and within our organizations. But more importantly, I think because social work is about bringing persons out of that state of displacement, then the social worker was one who put themselves at the end of giving that care. So you still primarily tried and really hard to meet the needs of those clients and the increasing number. So like as Christa went into e-health, then we too, in some instances, also did the same thing. The telephone became our friend, our way of communicating, our way of doing visits, and that was across the board. But at the same time, we also needed to take care of ourselves and the numbers of persons coming through. I want to add that through the 2 years, what the association saw was greater partnerships. And I think that is one lesson that has been learned coming out of COVID, the value of unity, the value of working together, the value of understanding we're in this together and we're in it to get through it as partners. So the association then was able to reach out and help with much of the care, very supportive roles from the
Right.
beginning. We continue to be very supportive in everything that's being done. But yes, like the others, we saw the increased numbers, but also too, I want persons to recognize that we being on the front line and have also been impacted by COVID-19, and those changes also brought up our own vulnerabilities as well. But through it all, we're here and we are making it through one day at a time. We're getting there.
Yeah, partnerships are key, and as they say, teamwork makes the dream work, and that's why it's good that we have all four of you here with us to share with our viewers what you have been doing and also offer some help to those who are out there maybe suffering in silence, giving them a helping hand as well. They can call us right here on the People's Business. Those numbers to call: 228-5562, 228-5563. If you have a question for any of our specialists here, just don't feel shy. Just make that call, answer your question, and get some help as we have the specialists in with us on the show. We'll take a break here. We have a lot more to talk about as we delve into the role of these mental health specialists in navigating difficult times. And let me tack on to that during COVID-19. And we're offering some help here, right here on the People's Business as well. So don't go anywhere. So viewers, as we discuss the role of these mental health specialists in helping to navigate these difficult times over the past 2 years, just a reminder to you that you have those numbers to call if you need some help or assistance here from one of our guests or specialists. Those numbers: 228-5562, 228-5563. And I want to go back to Dr. June Price-Humphrey, consultant psychiatrist, to talk about these demographics. Dr. Price-Humphrey, you spoke about a change in demographic, change in those people who you normally see coming for assistance. I know that in years gone by, anytime you speak about mental health, there's always this stigma attached to that person who may be suffering with that condition, who may be living with that condition. And I want to take suffering out of it too, because it's about living with whatever issue you have and getting the help that you need. But talk about these other demographics that you are not used to seeing, who are now who are coming for assistance.
Right. So around to that would be there are now psychiatrists at every polyclinic. They have been for a few years now, and often referrals we receive would include persons who are indeed ill, mentally ill. So meeting the criteria for major depressive disorder, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, from the medical point of view. Often you would have persons come in and say, well, I don't think I need a psychiatrist because I'm not mad, I'm crazy, those sort of things. Now we're seeing persons who accept that they are indeed suffering or struggling, whether or not there's a diagnosis to be made, and recognizing that they do indeed need to access help and are willing to do so. We have persons who are willing to do so in a public system who may have otherwise wanted to go. Right? We have persons who are willing to acknowledge that stigma or not, if they don't get help for this thing that they're struggling with, their lives are going to continue to deteriorate. And so demographic, I don't necessarily mean particular age or stage of life, but in tackling that stigma, persons who would otherwise have shied away from accessing help for whatever reason are now willing to come forward. And it's probably because it's accessible, it's acceptable, because in the polyclinic system, you're just going to a doctor, just like any other doctor. It's affordable because let's look at it. Many persons are out of work. And as Ms. Sharon-Rose Gittens mentioned, and all of our other colleagues, the social workers in particular, found that there's an uptick in what they needed to provide, because persons who were otherwise able to look after themselves or depend on family members are now unable to do so. And therefore, their pool of resources, financial, emotional, social, otherwise, also contracted. And one of the things I would mention, therefore, is that through this pandemic, the specialists across the board didn't stop working. We may have had to change how we did things. So I too had some online clients. I've had to make more home visits instead of fewer because persons just could not come out. But nonetheless, the demand is there. So from children to geriatric and everything in between, I would say if I were to identify one particular age group and demographic where there was an uptake, it would have been in the otherwise working population, the age group where they would have previously been able to look after themselves and access other support services. And right now, they're unable to do so. So that middle adulthood would be the group that I saw more of. But I would also add, it's also related to resources. They just didn't have the resources otherwise, emotionally, financially, socially, the way you can think of. And so they came through the public system.
So you find that anxiety from probably losing your job or being out of work would have driven more people to seek those services in that mode?
Anxiety, depression, a sense of hopelessness, a sense of going from living their life to just surviving from day to day. Most definitely, those are the things that I have seen. In the clinic and healthcare system, of course, I would be seeing the most severe, the ones where persons may think medication needs to be prescribed. And again, that's another to be discussed, because there would have been persons who would previously have totally rejected the idea, who recognize that in this time, they did need both the psychotherapy, talking therapy, social therapies, occupational therapies, plus or minus medical interventions. We need to remember that your brain is a part of your body and is under stress, just like the rest of your body is under stress. There is a connection between your mental and physical health. And so we want to remember that just because someone is under stress doesn't mean that it's only their behavior that changes. Sometimes it's their health. Sometimes it's their physical well-being also. Their diabetes or hypertension or fibromyalgia becomes harder to manage, as the brain, that organ in your head that controls how the rest of your body functions, was not functioning itself as it should. And so the persons that would come through the psychiatrists are often persons with some medical element. Nonetheless, there are some persons for whom this was the first time they had to see a doctor because they were previously well otherwise.
I had a conversation recently with Dr. Clyde Cave. I know he's not a specialist in this area, but he did say to me that he has been seeing more patients being or suffering from some level of anxiety, and even more of them having suicidal thoughts. Christa, are you hearing that? Have you been getting that feedback from some of the people that you have been seeing? People just giving up and losing all hope during this pandemic?
Yes, most definitely. I think anxiety and depression have been quite concerning. I think also, before COVID, we would have had some challenges, right? And, many of us may have ignored it. And then we have some stressors and significant stressors, and we realize, I was barely managing, but now I really need some help. So I do agree, as far as depression and anxiety being on the rise within within, mental health concerns. Of course, as a clinical psychologist, I also do assessments and diagnose as well. And so there have been times where it's been very severe that I've had to do a referral to a psychiatrist. And I find that I've had to do that quite a bit more than usual. And so I definitely concur with Dr. Cave there.
Interesting. It's hard to hear some of these stories where people have to try to cope just to live day by day. It can be difficult to manage, and it can be difficult for some to understand. There are some people, as we've heard, who have gone through this pandemic seemingly unscathed, but it will be difficult at all levels. We do have a caller on the line joining us here on the People's Business as we talk about the role of you, our mental health specialists, during these difficult times. Good evening, caller. Good night, caller. Welcome to the People's Business. What's your question? Please don't listen to your television. Please listen to the phone line.
Hello?
Hi, good night, caller. Welcome to the People's Business. Please listen to the phone line and not to the television. What's your question?
Yeah, I would like one of the panelists to explain to me what are the symptoms of ECD.
You're asking what are the symptoms of ECD? Okay. All right, so this one, what are some of the symptoms of ECD? I'm not aware of it, so I'm hoping one of my panelists can help me. No? Maybe we can get some clarification on that if we can get the caller to mute the TV as she has a conversation here with us. But we do have another caller on the line. Welcome to the People's Business. Good night. What's your question?
Good evening. Peace be on each and everyone. Blessed evening. Very interesting program. I call, I'm not asking a question, but I'm concerned about those persons who lose their jobs, losing their homes, not working, and going into depression. And then I notice now that there's a trend now, people committing suicide in this country. So I just hope that they will try to do something to really, I don't know if it be meetings or what we say, centers or whatever, that you could invite these persons who are under so much pressure to come and have meetings with them and counsel them, I should say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your contribution, caller. As I was saying just before we were joined by that caller, it is very difficult for people to cope during this time, and so many people have varying levels of problems, but then you see them come into the fore, and we just hope that we would be able to avoid hearing stories where people go the route of suicide. That is something that none of us wants to hear. Lorin, in your position, how do you help change people's perspective to a positive end, or to be more positive, to have a more positive outlook on life? How is your job in doing that? How do you make that happen?
Well, Shane, just before I answer that, I just want to go back to something that Dr. Price-Humphrey was saying, because you'd asked about the demographics, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to point out to, because in discussions with my colleagues, one of the demographics that has increased for us is actually children, younger children, right? Because we're talking about, we mentioned about the restriction of being able to do things. We have the homeschooling, etc. So that is something that we have noted, that you're having younger children now that are being referred to occupational therapy for emotional regulation. So that is one of the demographics that has been faced with some challenges.
Emotional regulation, right? What is that?
Yes, in the sense of coping with difficulties, how you cope with stress, and how your emotions react to things. Because if you think about it, our emotions can cause us to do some really great things, and also emotions can cause us to do some really not great things, right? So if we're not on top of managing them, of controlling them, many feel it's actually related to what we just asked about, positive thinking, particularly because the emotions are what tend to drive us sometimes. If it is not a, a clinical disorder, right? If it is not a disorder, if somebody's just not in a great place mentally, when you're feeling down, having the right strategies to cope with that, behavioral strategies, knowing, well, recognizing that I'm not feeling well. I'm not saying I'm not feeling well. I mean, I'm feeling down, I'm feeling stressed, and I need to do something to deal with this. One of the, it is increasing in children, simply because children are developing, so they don't have the strategies that adults would have, right? So we know that if I'm very angry, perhaps it's not the best thing for me to stand up and argue with you. Maybe I need to take a walk and cool down before I come back to talk with you, Shane. Right? Before the argument escalates. Or if I'm feeling very down, maybe I need to find a trusted friend and open up to, speak to them, share my emotions, etc. So it would be taken that adults more readily have access to these things, but children definitely don't. So one of the things that we've noticed is that children in particular, because they've been isolated the same way that adults have been isolated during the lockdown, and they're doing online school. Online school, it doesn't allow them to talk with their friends as much, right? They are logged into classes, but they don't have the same social interaction and things like that. So that was one of the increases in the demographics that we were seeing. Now, going to the question that you asked just now, helping people turn positive, it takes psychoeducation. You need to engage them. The first thing that we need to look at is recognizing and accepting the emotion. And this might sound like a simple thing, but this is something that I find that many people have challenges with. I'm not sure if it is a cultural thing, if it is a Barbadian thing or whatever, but there is a trend that persons don't want to acknowledge. It was said before that sometimes people are in denial, but that uncomfortable emotions, we only tend to acknowledge them when we get to a critical point, right? When we get to a point that I really cannot deal with this, that is then I realize that I have a problem. But ideally, we will be able to recognize that before, and that is how you can start to develop behavior adaptation. So doing things to intervene. You can do stress reduction techniques, deep breathing, as I said, finding a trusted friend. A simple thing that I've also encouraged some of my clients to do is that when you're in a great mood, you take a list and you put down all the things that you like to do, positive things that you like to do, things that lift your mood. I like to listen to music, I like to go for walks, etc. And when you're feeling down, you know that, and once you have the awareness that you're feeling down, you go and you pull something from this list to try to lift your mood, right? But it is not an immediate thing. It takes some education to go through that process. It takes awareness. That's where it starts.
Wow. All right, let's take a break here, and when we come back, we're going to go back to our social worker here on the line with us, Mrs. Sharon-Rose Gittens, to talk about their role, and now that we have eased some restrictions, if they're able to get back out into the community to help those who are in need there. We still have a lot to talk about right here on The People's Business. We're discussing the role of mental health specialists in difficult times. We'll be back in a moment. Back in a moment. Thanks for staying with us here on The People's Business as we're discussing the role of these mental health specialists in helping you to navigate those difficult times. More of you have been seeking their assistance over the past 2 years. And also the assistance of Mrs. Sharon-Rose Gittens, who's the president of the Barbados Association of Professional Social Workers. So, Sharon-Rose, now that things have eased up a bit, we've seen an ease in the restrictions where you're able to move around a bit more freely. Are you able now to get to help those who are most in need of your services, or is it still a touch and go situation as COVID is still in the air?
What I will share with you is that we never left the community. We never, in everything, in all the lockdowns, in the COVID-19 protocols, the social workers were still out there. We just became very adaptable. At this present time, we are still available. We are still reaching out because, as the others shared, it's not easy knowing that a person is struggling and have to reach a point where, in acknowledging their negative feelings and their inability to cope, then seeking the mental health aspect and therapies as needed when the stressor is something that can be dealt with. What social workers have also been doing is connecting persons with the so what we call the psychosocial or psychological first aid, having gone through the trauma and having now trying to adjust and re-understand the resources within themselves and understand the resources that exist within the community, within our society. And we try to link those persons wherever the need is so that it does not become so overwhelming. And as you shared, and as everyone here with, we do not like to think of someone having to commit suicide given the stressor of COVID-19 and thinking they're unable to cope with it. We do have a number of resources in our society alone to help persons through it, and at the same time to give you those resources that are necessary. Even in terms of having lost, yes, you've lost a job, yes, you've lost and you struggle with providing food, you may have lost in terms of having a place to stay, loss of connection, and it could also be a child or even a teenager. I mean, our society is one that offers so much, but I think persons need to be made more aware of what we have to offer, and then understanding the process of engaging in those services so that it's not easy to, the person to think, well, this is what I'm going through, but recognizing that there are others going through it with you, and everybody is trying to tap into the same resource, which is available, which we have made accommodations for. However, the time in which those services may be offered is a time to work with, which can again add some stress to that individual. But I want listeners to understand, yes, services are there. Yes, you can, it's accessible to all. There's no restrictions or inequalities that exist based on your age or sex or gender or nationality. Barbados offers a wonderful social protection system. So where the social worker comes in is connecting you with those services and being able to give you that, help you grow out of that sense of hopelessness and helplessness. And as I said, COVID-19 has shown the joys of teamwork and partnerships. So we've been able to do it with families. So we haven't gone anywhere, Shane. We're still working quite hard, and it's still an increased number of persons who have sought help during those 2 years. And I think a number of those persons can still at this time say that the help was well deserved and it just start to stabilize them. Coming, as you stabilize through COVID, then you're able to see yourself emerging stronger, more resilient than when we started in 2020.
Looking at the current situation, all of you are coping with what is a new normal. Do you expect, and I'm getting questions from a number of spheres. We have Facebook, of course, our callers are calling in, and then some questions come into my phone as well. So for this one coming to me, there's a phenomenon post-COVID, and will we see a lot of these mental health issues lingering as we ease out of the pandemic? And do we have the number of specialists to address the number of people now demanding these services? So I'll put that question to you, Dr. Price-Humphrey, and also Christa.
Sure. So when we hear post-COVID, long COVID, we think of the lingering effects of having contracted the virus. And it's right now, after 2 years, that those symptoms do not always correlate with the severity of your respiratory symptoms. So we know that when you're acutely ill, you have the cough, the cold, the sneeze, chest pain, fever, whatever the case may be, loss of smell or taste. But some viruses invade your nerve cells. The brain is one big nerve, and it extends through the body. And there are persons who are with post-COVID, long COVID, if you're looking at it from that medical side, who may have moodiness that they did not previously experience prior to the illness. And of course, we may think, okay, you're feeling a little ill, viruses make you feel low and lethargic, but you're no longer contagious, and you still don't have the energy, don't have the motivation, maybe don't have the up and go. I would give the comparison to chikungunya. Some persons who've had chikungunya know that they had joint pain long after the virus has gone. And so there's research on what exactly causes these post-viral syndromes. That being the case, because it can affect your nerve cells, yes, mental health and general feelings of unwell, feeling generally out of sorts. Mental health, you have a sense of feeling well, being able to function, contribute to society, and persons may find that following an infection, they don't feel well, they can't contribute, they can't keep going. And it's a bit difficult to diagnose at this stage because we now have to be aware of it in order to diagnose it. But it is one of the things to consider. So that's the medical side of it, and I'll let my colleagues look into the answer regarding the social and emotional of post-COVID.
Yeah, before we get Christa in on it, let's welcome another caller here to the People's Business. Good night, caller. Welcome. What's your question? Good night, caller.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, I'm hearing you now. Welcome to the People's Business. What's your question?
My question is, the reason why people do not go to seek help is the stigma attached to it. You see, a lot of people don't want people to know that they have family or friends that is that way because there's no confidentiality in certain aspects. It's all over. So they shy away. Some even when they don't have the come to clinic, they get off at the stop before the mental or the one after because they don't want nobody to see or know that they're going for help. So most of it is the stigma. Because I've been a nurse for 26 years at the institution. I was trained in England, and I know. Because people go for help in England regardless of what, but not here in Barbados. They will go to the QEH when they have certain things, but when it comes to mental illness, I mean, the borderline is not that much. Anything can happen. If it's hereditary or, whether it's hereditary or something stressful. But the stigma is there. And I'm glad that they have these people in the clinics that they can go to rather than go to the hospital.
Thank you so much, caller. We appreciate your time and your comment here on the People's Business. Christa, that is something that I mentioned right at the top. The stigma attached to any issue with mental wellness. People don't want to be seen going into the psychiatric hospital in some cases. And that can be a problem as well. That can turn away some people from wanting to seek medical help when they really need it. So when all of you are seeing this surge in the number of people seeking assistance, there are definitely more people in the community who may need the help but are not coming because of the stigma attached. What do we need to do to address that in 2022?
In 2022, we have to recognize that mental illness is an illness, just like physical illness, like diabetes and all the others that we know. There is a stigma, and I'm not going to deny that. But I think a larger conversation has to be about how, as a society, do we change that? How do we talk about mental health? One of the things that psychologists do is something called an employee assistance program. And that's where companies would have a psychologist, where staff can have, easy access to ask for help, or psychologists and psychiatrists or any mental health professional can go in and to do sessions. And why I pinpoint that is that we have to open up a conversation about mental health, just like you're doing right here. Within our families, within our friend groups, we have to normalize the conversation where we talk about this is what mental health is about. I think a lot of it as well is a lack of education too. And so being able to do that psychoeducation is important, being able to create spaces where, just like we're doing here, where people can ask their questions. But I do think in every group, from church groups, every group, we need to have mental health conversations and normalize it in a way that people feel comfortable, not only talking about it, but asking for help. And I will say too, I don't know if it's culturally, but somebody says to you, I'm depressed or stressed out, we dismiss it sometimes, right? And you just need to get over it. And that attitude needs to change. As parents, we need to listen to our children a little more and hear what they're going through. But as adults, listen to each other and create a safe space where people can talk about how they're feeling and be able to help them access the help that they need. So it's a mindset shift, a conversation shift, but we need to do it. I also want to highlight as well, there's some young people who started, their mental health advocates. They started an Instagram page called Let's Unpack It. And they have been posting lots of information on that page, on that Instagram page. And we need to see more things like that as well happening, where we normalize this conversation.
Let's unpack it. I'll definitely look out for it, because anything that can help the conversation, that can help people out there who need it, we definitely want to get that assistance to them. So anything that helps. We'll take one quick break, and then when we come back, we'll get the final comments from our specialists right here on The People's Business. Time to get some last words as we wrap up this edition of The People's Business from our guests, Dr. June Price-Humphrey, Mrs. Sharon-Rose Gittens, Christa Soleyn, and Lorin Brathwaite, all helping to, well, really help many people out there cope with these difficult times during COVID-19. I want to talk about something that Christa just mentioned. Thanks to our production team for pulling it up so quickly. Let's unpack it. That's what you call it, Christa? This is it here?
Yes. So these are just students who've come and placed some information. Sometimes they would have some psychologists on. So I think my larger point is, advocacy like this. We've had quite a few churches also reach out for sessions, companies reach out for sessions, and we need to see more of this.
So you can check that out on Instagram for those of you who use that platform. So as we wrap up, as I said, I want to get some final words, some quick comments from each of you. And I'll start where with the last guest that made the comment. So we're going to do it in reverse here right now. So let's start with our social worker, Mrs. Sharon-Rose Gittens, the president of the Barbados Association of Professional Social Workers. What is that one message that you would want to get out to those that you go to help in the community and those people who are still seeking help but are afraid to say something?
My one message would be a situation where I'm taking it out of the individual who feels sad, depressed, hurting, and feel the stigma out there prevents them from making that next step. I'm really suggesting that the family member in that person's home, the community, the neighborhood, the employee, whoever is around that individual, I want you to reach out on behalf of that individual for the help. And obviously it encourages them to know that there's someone else going through this journey with them rather than thinking they're in it by themselves. Yeah. The social worker is a highly trained professional who seeks to make a difference, who advocates to make that difference, and who base their intervention on your particular resources as well as the resources in your society. And they're quite knowledgeable to do so. So my takeaway for everyone listening, it does not have to stay with that individual who feels very overwhelmed. It's those around that particular person or family that can reach out for the help, and we're here for you.
Lorin, some final comments from you?
Well, what I would like to say is that if there's anybody out there who might feel that they're struggling with something, that they don't know what to do, that you are not alone. COVID and tough times in general affect everyone, right? So don't be afraid to go and seek help. Yes, there's the stigma around mental health, there's stigma around the psychiatric hospital, but if that's your only option, go. If you're a friend to someone or a family member to someone and you know that they need help, you recognize that, volunteer yourself to accompany them, because sometimes people just need someone to support them, to take them along that path. But there's help out there, there's professionals out there, people who want to help you, who are willing to help you. So just present yourself.
Between Christa and Dr. Price-Humphrey, you have 1 minute. Our time is short, but we still know that you have an important message to deliver to our viewers. Christa, let's go with you. Your message, your final message here on this edition of The People's Business.
I would say what my other two colleagues said summed it up, but I just want to add that you are worth the effort. If you need help, seek help. You are definitely worth the effort. And also I want to talk to everybody who can hear my voice. Be intentional about taking care of yourself.
Dr. Price-Humphrey?
Yes, and I will quickly wrap up by saying that in terms of advocacy and providing information, the Association of Psychiatrists will be hosting a series of events online, including a Facebook page. I would like persons to recognize that there are services at every polyclinic, psychiatric hospital, Queen Elizabeth, and that we have, you're not alone, and services available, and just reach out and we'll make ourselves available to you.
I really want to thank all of you for your time and really salute you for your service during these difficult times of the COVID-19 pandemic. And please keep safe and continue to do what you're doing and do it to the best of your ability, helping those people with those mental health challenges in our community see a brighter light, a brighter future so that they can be productive members of our society. But we want all of you to stay safe until the next time we chat, and have a good week of activities as well coming up. And we want to thank you viewers for watching us here on People's Business as we discussed the role of the mental health specialist in navigating difficult times. If you have an issue, seek help. There are a number of numbers that you can call, and also at every polyclinic there is a psychiatrist or a psychiatric specialist stationed there who can offer some level of assistance. Again, thank you for viewing and staying with us. Until next time, you stay safe. Good night.